Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 in 2024. Lewis Hamilton has revealed he's been spending much more time at the Mercedes factory than he really ever has over the last several weeks to simulate conversations, to check up on how the engineers are getting on, and to really ensure that Mercedes are making the correct decisions in terms of what Hamilton believes is necessary for the development of the W15. Will this pay off, this more proactive approach from Hamilton to get the car that he wants next season? Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you're new as always. One of the big talking points though of the day, no doubt about it, is stake F1 team. So here we go. Sauber revealed that they're not going to be called stake F1 team kick Sauber or whatever it was going to be. They're going to get rid of the latter half of that and it's just going to be stake F1 team. No Sauber involved at all. Nice and clean, nice and simple. And I do wonder, however, what this is really going to look like from a broadcasting perspective. I know that certain broadcasters such as Sky might have difficulties given that stake is basically a gambling online casino company, and sure, the slightly dodgier sponsors tend to pay more money than the non-dodgy sponsors, so it is what it is. So, you know, Kick, Stake, they're all part of the same thing. Kick.com is the streaming service. Stake.com is what basically funds the whole operation. It's going to be straight up Stake F1 team going forwards. Now, of course, that's going to be 2024 and 2025. So Alfa Romeo, of course, are long gone now. It's going to be, you know, Stake F1 team. Not even calling themselves Sauber, which is interesting. We'll discuss in a second. Of course, Audi will then come in 2026. But Stake F1 team will mark the beginning of a brand new, dynamic and exciting era. You know, maybe they asked ChatGPT to come up with this, one that breaks away from conventional concepts of sport and entertainment sponsorship. So incredible corporate speak. Now, I believe they will also call themselves Kick F1 team on certain races where they are not allowed to have like gambling sponsors. There's certain races, certain Grand Prix, certain countries where that's not allowed. So on those weekends, they'll call themselves Kick F1 team. I don't know if it was maybe Spa or Belgium last year or something like that, where they had to change the livery just to kick and get rid of stake. Maybe it was Zandvoort. You guys probably remember better than I do, but I think they had the same kind of thing last year when there was the semi-sponsorship going on. This year, they're going one step further. What are people actually going to end up calling this team? Knows what I wonder, because it's still kind of Sauber. I think that's what people will generally try and say, but maybe it's not the end of the world. I know people are getting, you know, understandably frustrated about the fact that, you know, these sponsors are in Formula 1, but to be honest, this is not exactly a new thing to have sponsors like this in F1. I mean, obviously the tobacco days, it wasn't long ago where we've got all the crypto sponsors. People lost a lot of money on that over the last few years with, you know, even Petronas, right, who sponsor Mercedes. Let's not forget Aramco, right, who sponsor and basically now own Aston Martin, or at least I think they took a stronger position in that. We know like it's McLaren, right, and the Bahrain investment over there. So, you know, there's lots of stuff going on in Formula 1. This is not a new thing, and you can actually argue that like an online casino is one of the least dodgy sponsors that we've really had in Formula 1 history. But I know there's been lots of talk about it over the last couple of days. There was also discussion for Andrew Benson, we'll see here in a second, just after I mentioned this from Josh Ravel. Stake F1 team Sauber is what people might come up with here. Now, it's likely this car will be green, because Stake, I don't really know if they have a set colour, but Kick certainly do. Kick is green, that's the whole thing, because Twitch.tv is purple, YouTube.com is red, so Kick.com went for green. And if you see here on their Instagram, they are revealing the car on the 5th of February 2024, and it's very much looking like a green livery. And I'm actually kind of down to see a green livery. It might be incredibly ugly, but it will at least stand out, because I think over the last couple of years, we've had lots of cars, especially with the stripping away of paints, that look very similar. They're black, they're dark blue, you know, this one's red, that one's also kind of red as well. So I'm kind of down for this. Hopefully they do a decent job. This was a tweet from Andrew Benson back on the 15th of December when they initially said they were going to be called Stake F1 Team Kick Sauber, but and at the time they had a discussion with the BBC because, you know, according to restrictions on sponsorship and advertising, and in the interest of general straightforwardness of lack in communication, they had a meeting and they decided for elegance and simplicity it will be Sauber. And that's fine when the team is called Stake F1 Team Kick Sauber. You can just say, all right, we're going to shorten it to Sauber. But when it's just Stake F1 Team, you know, what are they going to do? Is it okay to call them Sauber when let's say you're a brand new fan to Formula One this upcoming season, you're like, well, who is Sauber? This is Steak, F1 team or whatever, right? At least it's one syllable. It rolls off the tongue a little bit. It's maybe a little bit ugly, but maybe it's better than calling the team Sauber when they're not even Sauber anymore, even though they are. It's a messy one. Intrigued your thoughts in the comments below. There's also lots of talk. This was a very interesting one today on potential influence of Aldi, but also the future of Sauber drivers market. Nico Hülkenberg, we've known, has been linked to the team for some time. But what about this one? Esteban Ocon. I don't imagine he's going to be leaving Alpine anytime soon, but you never really know at Alpine, especially given, their history and the fact that Gasly, I would say, definitely outperformed Ocon on average over this most recent season, especially because Gasly was first in. Definitely possible that Ocon-Gasly could have more friction. I think Ocon said that for the new season he's going to be all-out attack, So that means that I'm sure we're going to see Ocon push Gasly into a wall, maybe the other way around, at least a couple of times in this upcoming season. So how about an Ocon move to Sauber, especially if it does become Audi? Is Ocon really convinced in this Alpine 5-year plan, 3-year plan, 10-year plan to win some races? I don't see it personally. An Audi, sure, they might not start off great, but at least they've got seemingly the intention and definitely the resources to become a force in Formula One. So definitely some interesting potential targets to have a look at. One other piece of good news for certain teams is around gardening leave with the start of the new year here in 2024. Quite often when engineers especially are effectively bought outright by another team, or they get a better offer elsewhere, or they're fired and, let go on a gardening leave period where they can't just immediately leave and take other information elsewhere. They have to be, they just sit on the sidelines and still get paid. So it's not too bad in that position, but, generally they'd prefer to be working and, putting progress towards a new great car concept or whatever. So there's a few engineers that this affects, as it will for a couple of McLaren guys, actually. David Sanchez, formerly of Ferrari, and Rob Marshall, formerly of Red Bull. So a couple of key hires that McLaren have made over the last year or so. Their gardening leave periods are now over, and they can officially join McLaren as of today and work on their upcoming concepts. How influential will they be for this year's McLaren? Probably not much. It's basically already been designed and it's being revealed in just over a month at this point, but still for the future that is definitely a good sign for those guys. Mercedes are in an interesting spot. They should be on paper the chief contender for Red Bull in the upcoming season, but they've got big progress to make if they want to achieve that. We saw Mercedes and Toto Wolff say just the other day that there are so many changes they're looking to make with this car, and we mentioned that if they get it right, if everything is correct, if they nail all the upgrades they want to bring, maybe they can be competitive with Red Bull. If they don't, it's going to be a challenge, but at least they're going all out attack, it seems. Mercedes, they're basically throwing away the old car and improving it in every way they believe they can, and if it works, great. We might have another championship contender. If it doesn't, they could be in a tough spot, but, I think given the words that are coming out of the team, they're going to give it their best shot for the next couple of years. Now, this maybe in large part depends on how confident the drivers feel with the car. We know that the upgrade they brought to Austin, apparently it only saved him like a tenth of a second in terms of actual performance per lap, but Hamilton said that he was gaining at least that, if not more, in confidence in the car. Now, maybe that only really applied when the ride height was too low and they then got disqualified, but nonetheless, it was a factor when they brought an upgrade. Hamilton and Russell's confidence in the car went up. They could do more with it. Certainly in qualifying, that's basically the most important aspect. Perez isn't that far behind Max in raw pace. He's off Max in raw pace, but I imagine that a lot of the reason why we saw Perez be several tenths of a second off Max in qualifying is, sure, there's an actual skill delta, but there's also like a confidence delta where you're not confident the car is going to do what you want through a corner, and Verstappen certainly has that, and Hamilton has had that, and other dominant drivers have had that on the years they've dominated. If you don't have that, the car goes slower, even more slow than it already is. So Hamilton is trying to ensure, and let's be honest, Mercedes have made it quite clear over the last couple of months that Hamilton is still their number one guy. Toto Wolff is talking about getting Hamilton the 8th title. The engineers at Mercedes are implying that, Hamilton is the guy that we still trust will get the job done if we deliver him the car. And Russell's good as well. And maybe Russell can become that guy for Mercedes in the future, although that is, many people would doubt the validity of that statement. But for now, Hamilton is still their, number one, as it were. They're not going to say that. Russell certainly doesn't believe that to be the case, but I think that's kind of how it looks from the outside looking in. So Hamilton will want to ensure ensure the car behaves in the way that he wants the car to behave, especially after he supposedly gave them lots of pointers during 2022 on what he'd like to see in 2023 on the W14, especially after all the guinea pig testing that he did during that season. And then the engineers were maybe too arrogant to get rid of the zero pods. They stuck with it, and it's, Hamilton's had to drive that car all season. And then Toto Wolff gets on the radio in Austria to say, look, Lewis, we know the car's bad, but please drive it, and many other such examples. Hamilton says that his key driving point is getting back on the top step, seeing the team, enjoying the moment. He talks about a particular moment in Australia 2015. The team was down there in tears, after winning in 2014, keeping it up in 2015. That the power of that is a huge part of the drive. Winning the World Championship is a huge part of the drive. Continuing to build with the team on the impact work we're doing, continuing to push with the team with Mission 44. So Hamilton always, good at PR spokesman, but he also talks some very interesting things on the state of the W15, but also how proactive he is being to make this car become competitive, because the W15 is a massively important car for Mercedes. Next year, the focus of basically every team is not going to be on the W16 or the RB21 or whatever, right? Not so much. It's more so going to be on the 2026 project, because that's the big story. That's the change of the engine regulations, that's the change of all the power unit stuff, and that's the change of aerodynamic regulations as well. So next year's car, 2025's car, will be effectively a back burner car for the entire time. As soon as January 1st comes around 2025, when the teams are officially allowed to start work on the 2026 project, that's what they will do. So this year's car for every team will basically be the same as next year's car. They will be all evolutions next year of this year, so it's massively important to get it right. Hamilton said that. He said the last 6 months and maybe the last 4 months going into these next 2 months are massively influential for how their next couple of seasons are going to go. And Hamilton says the following: I'm in the factory much more often now, having meetings with all the department heads to try and motivate and encourage them all. So he's not saying, look, I know how to build this car, I know how the design works, show me the CFD files, and, I'll move this aero piece around here. He's not going to try and say that I know more about aero than these guys do, but trying to motivate, trying to encourage them. I talk to them, show them where we need to improve and what direction we need to go in. I just try and help them be positive and to say that we can do it. So, okay, good motivational stuff, but really it's about delivering the car. I also looked closely at other vehicles, so we know that he said this a while ago, that he was, taking pictures, whether literally or in his mind, about what other teams were doing, and asked a lot of questions just to stimulate ideas. So as I say, it's not like Hamilton's going into the engineering room and, drawing up, maps of what he wants the floor to look like on the whiteboard, but he is asking the right questions and basically just saying to the guys, this is how we need the car to behave, this is what the Red Bull does. I mean, even Hamilton talked about it during Austin. I think they even asked Charles Leclerc about this. So basically Hamilton was following Verstappen for quite a bit in Austin, the Grand Prix there, and especially the sprint race as well, and Hamilton was, taking notes of how the Red Bull behaved in certain corners and how he saw the Red Bull behaving compared to how his own car was behaving underneath him. Charles Leclerc was asked about this, and Leclerc said, well, I can't really visualize it in quite that way, and maybe Hamilton can. And Hamilton says that he can, and says that he gained insight from sitting behind Verstappen for a few laps, trying to challenge him, but really just reading how that car behaved through the corners from, his perspective sitting behind it. Now, maybe the TV pictures do a better job of that, but that's at least Hamilton's feeling. So he's taken some of those ideas, talked to the team about it, knows where his own limitations are within the car and where they need more, downforce. Really, that's the name of the game at the end of the day. It's generating more downforce without sacrificing drag, because there were quite a few tracks this season on average where the Mercedes only really lost out in the straight line speed category. They were, equally fast in some of the corners, maybe not so much the higher speed corners, and certainly if you watched any onboard from the W14 this season, you would have seen just so much oversteer. The rear of the car just stepping away time and time again. The rear downforce was a key point of concern. So Hamilton obviously knows that. He's getting the point across. Is this going to be enough, though, I guess is the question, right? But it's interesting that Hamilton says that he's spending more time than he pretty much ever has. I mean, I suppose for the last several years, there's no need to spend much time in the factory. He's confident the guys know what they're doing. The regulations are relatively static. Mercedes clearly knew what was going on. They just dominated the previous year. They knew what type of car Hamilton liked. They knew what characteristics worked well, and it was a matter of executing that again. The last couple of years have been a different story for Mercedes, and Hamilton thinks, you know what, it's in my and the team's best interests to make sure my points are very much known. I wonder if the same applies here for Russell, because if Hamilton's going in and saying, all right, I want the car to behave like this, want it to behave like that, can you design it so it's going to do so? And is Russell there saying, well, actually, I'd kind of like it to behave a bit differently, but the Mercedes engineers are probably not listening so much to, one-time race winner George Russell than they are to 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton. For now, you would imagine. So tweet your thoughts and all that in the comment section below. Just one final thing to mention for you guys before we sign off the video. Daniel Ricciardo has certainly talked about, the next couple of years of his Formula One career, what he wants to achieve. He also said that having returns, kind of getting a second chance in a way, expecting top performance from himself, going to give it, all guns blazing from now until I guess what would be the end of his career. But as he says, I'd expect to do things such as he did in Mexico. He had a great Grand Prix in Mexico. Yes, the AlphaTauri was good there. Tsunoda probably could have had a better race if he didn't make that mistake and, colliding, of course, with Piastri as he did down into turn one. But Ricciardo was insanely strong that weekend. We know it's a good circuit for him and the AlphaTauri was competent there, but it was still massively impressive, especially what he did in qualifying. So Ricciardo intends to keep that up. I expect to do things like I did in Monaco. And as we talked about yesterday, there's been lots of rumours and pointers lately that Sergio Perez gone early or mid-season 2024 is a viable prospect. And if it is, Ricciardo will be the man. But that's going to take two sides. That's going to take Perez starting off next season on the same foot that he finished this season on, and it's going to take Ricciardo probably outperforming where he was last season to make that decision feel like a no-brainer for Red Bull. Then again, knowing Christian Horner and Daniel Ricciardo's relationship, I think Horner would probably, jump at any chance. If there's any viability to making that move happen, if you can justify it, if Ricciardo has a good first couple of the race of the season, if Perez had a couple of stinkers, then I think that move will be made sooner rather than later. But very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.